We're talking about spiders, and we're talking about pervitin, and we're talking about Bigfoot. I'm here to tell you where he's been. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way. Here we go now. I'm talking about Mr. Gulley, and you don't know where he's been. Oh no, he's been right in your alley. Well, I'm Mr. Gulley, yes I am. So what we're talking about? We're talking about spiders, and we're talking about pervitin, and we're talking about Bigfoot. I'm here to tell you where he's been. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking on your Monday night? Hope you had a great weekend. Maybe you'll let me tell you about the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. And maybe you were with us yesterday for our members-only show that was going to be all about a bunch of cranky things, a bunch of things that sort of, stick in your craw that annoy you. Because I thought that would make a great show for a Sunday. It turned out that somebody called in on Saturday. I called them back while I was on the air, and they called about the Lenny Bruce show that we did last week. Apparently they were a big fan and historian of Lenny Bruce, and they were very complimentary about the show that we did on that. And that made my day so much, it turned into a celebration of happiness, fellowship, and good times, So before I tell you, on the heels of what apparently is a devastating earthquake that happened in Myanmar, formerly Burma, of 7.7 on the Richter scale, followed by a 6.4 12 minutes later, we'll tell you about the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which is easily the most devastating earthquake here in the United States. You'll let me sort of tell you about like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. These are all things, especially subscribing and liking, that you can do completely free. It only costs you a click. And it helps us with the algorithm, the almighty, all-powerful algorithm that we all serve. And then we do have super chats and memberships. We love it when you help us out in that regard because, of course, helps us pay the bills around here. We are so down in every metric on this show this month. It's absolutely, not that you care, nor should you, but everything is down. It's not good. This is the last day of the month, so we have to really make a charge. I don't want to get Aaron Imholt about this and shake a collection plate or anything. Ooh, man. And then if you look at what we call the begging bar, that's where I tell you about our merchandise store and everything else there at the bottom. You can help us out. But mainly I want to tell you to turn on your gifted memberships because some very generous, super nice people do come in here and they gift memberships. They just give them out of the goodness of their heart. If yours turned on, you just might get one. We do have a couple of chats here in our chat room so far. And I forgot to distribute this on Twitter. I guess I'll do that after the show and see how well that works. The non-live version. Chef is in the house. Yes, he is an official chef. He chefs all the time. And we love having him around. He knows my sisters. I don't know what more you need to know than that. Oh, by the way, pay no attention to the destruction behind me. That's San Francisco in 1906. And Dupa is here. Dupa Do, a long-time member of the show and a beloved member of our chat room who always has a good take and observation on stuff, says hello. We do have the most cheerful chat room on the internet, as verified by independent sources. Pepe Silva in here. Sylvia, excuse me. He says hi. He makes everything more peppy, I think. And then Chef is saying hi to folks. People saying hi is it's a hallmark of our chat room. And we hope you'll enjoy that. I guess I should get busy telling you. Good news for you, the home viewer. I have a ton, and I mean a ton of photos of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. I have a lot of pictures. And actually, that's part of the history. And I'll get to that in just a second. But we have a ton of photos of that for you, including this one, which is basically just a duplicate of the one behind me. But let me just show you that in full screen here so you can get a better look at it. So way back in 1906, at 5:12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which was a Wednesday, the northern coast of California was struck by a major earthquake with an estimated magnitude of 7.9. Now, in subsequent years, and with kind of the forensic data they've accumulated, that could have been as high as 8.3. They're not quite sure. Okay. They've looked at a lot of different things. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. I have lots of information about this. Thank you, Mountain Dew Zero. At any rate, when you think about it, it was 5:12 in the morning, meaning that most people were still at home in bed. All right. More than 3,000 people died as a result of this earthquake. And more importantly, over 80% of the city was destroyed. And we'll get into how that happened too, which is probably not what you think it is. It's remembered as the deadliest earthquake in the history of the United States, and the death toll remains the greatest loss of life from any natural disaster here in the United States. Now, this was a result of a shift in the San Andreas Fault. I think most people know what that is, and that it runs down through most of California. And it's the boundary of the Pacific Plate in terms of North American tectonic plates. So I don't need to go too far into that. Okay. This particular earthquake actually happened 3 full decades, 30 years before the development of the Richter scale. But they did have measurements. Okay, so they were able to convert those measurements to create the Richter scale rating that they eventually came up to. And it really shifted things. Now, this is a tunnel. This is a slip on the San Andreas Fault, and it's visible in what was called Wright's Tunnel along the South Pacific Coast Railroad after the earthquake. And as you can see here, not only did it buckle sort of the framework of this tunnel, but it actually poked through the edge of the tunnel and made it bulge in one section. When the earth moves and shifts itself 10 feet, that's a big deal. Even if it only does it in one spot, it's a tremendous amount of energy that is released, okay? According to findings published in the Journal of Geophysical Research, severe deformations in the Earth crust took place before and after the earthquake. So this was an accumulated strain on those two plates that was lasting a long time, and just building up. And this rupture was about a total of 296 miles, and the shaking was felt from Oregon to Los Angeles and felt as far inland as central Nevada. Okay, that rupture, a 300-mile rupture. A strong foreshock preceded the main body of the earthquake shaking, and that foreshock lasted 20 to 25 seconds, which is a really long time for the earth to shake if you're standing on the earth. And the strong shaking, the even more intense shaking of the earth that happened during the actual earthquake, lasted unimpeded for 42 seconds, which is, again, a very long time. I thought about, for dramatic effect, going, this is how long it lasted, and then remaining silent for 42 seconds. But I realized that a lot of people wish that I would remain silent for the entire program. So I don't know that would have achieved the desired result there. But that is a major, major shift in the Earth's structure. There were decades of minor earthquakes, more than ever in the history of California before this quake. They were used to these little tiny ones, right? And those are now believed to have been caused by erosion from hydraulic mining, the California gold rush, and a lot of other things. But those little shifts were kind of, trying to get your foot into a shoe that's not quite big enough. And finally it happens. Those were just probably making the problem worse that resulted in this devastating earthquake. Now, for years, scientists thought the epicenter of this quake was near a town in Marin County due to certain displacements of the earth. But in the 1960s, scientists looked at all the data and started to propose that the epicenter was more than likely offshore, off of the coast of San Francisco, basically just a little northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge. And most recent analysis and, more advanced technology and theory suggests that very same thing, right? Using old photographs in 2019 and eyewitness accounts, they refined it just a little, but basically it's in the same place. It's just barely offshore of San Francisco. So there occurred a thing that is called soil liquefaction, okay? That is something that occurs when soil that has just a little bit of water in it, moist soil, takes on the characteristics of water because of how much it's shaking. It basically, the soil becomes one thing, one giant. It's not little pieces of sand anymore. It's part of the same deal. And soil liquefaction did occur during this, and that helps them determine the shaking intensity of the whole thing. Now, aftershocks. Oh boy, aftershocks. There were actually fewer aftershocks than would have been expected for an earthquake of this size. Normally, an earthquake of this size, you have lots and lots of aftershocks. The huge release of energy from the actual earthquake kind of got rid of everything. The reason the earthquake was so huge, so intense, was that it let go of all of its power at one time. And the aftershocks were at the very ends of the fault line where this occurred, okay? The only aftershock in the first few days occurred near Santa Cruz, and it was a 4.9. The largest aftershock happened about 5 days later west of Eureka with an estimated magnitude of 6.7. And they're counting this. Another one occurred 3 years later that they basically have attributed to being part of this same earthquake, just kind of sorting things out along those two tectonic plates. So there was a swarm of earthquakes in the Imperial Valley about an hour after all of this happened. Not an hour, sorry, 12 hours, a little more than 12 hours, roughly 12 hours later. And then another event occurred just after midnight, and it was about a 5.0. But really, they got out of it pretty easily when you consider the huge nature of this particular earthquake. Just a few things here. People saying hi, people saying hi, people saying hi. Julian Zezer says that tunnel fault picture is amazing. I've never seen it before. Well, hopefully I'll have some other pictures that you may not have seen before. Although I know that'll be tough, Julian, because you are a very well-educated man. Gene1313 says quicksand. Quicksand, yes, is a form of soil liquefaction, although quicksand is not caused by shaking. It is caused by a higher moisture content than in the soil liquefaction that happened during this earthquake. Coach Mike Rodick says, hello to all my friends in chat. Oh, hey, Tom. Hello, Coach Mike. Now the damage. Now let's get to what I know you all want to hear about. Let's get to the damage, shall we? Let's get to the damage caused by this earthquake. And oh boy, was there a lot of damage. Was there a lot of damage. This isn't even that bad compared to what I'm about to show you. Early death counts ranged from 375 to over 500. However, hundreds of fatalities in Chinatown went unrecorded. The total number of deaths is still sort of vague, but various reports presented a range of 700 to 3,000 plus. In 2005, the city's Board of Supervisors voted unanimously in support of a resolution written by a novelist and a historian to recognize the figure at 3,000 plus as the official total. And that wasn't just ceremonial. They had a lot of good evidence and reasons that is likely the most accurate figure. Now, most of the deaths occurred within San Francisco, but 189 were reported elsewhere in the Bay Area in cities like Santa Rosa, San Jose, which also suffered severe damage. Between 227,000 and 300,000 people were left homeless out of a population of about 400,000. So a little over half to 2/3 of the people who lived in San Francisco homeless. Half of those people evacuated. They fled to Oakland or Berkeley. All right. There were makeshift tents that were established all over Golden Gate Park, the Presidio, the Panhandle, and the beaches of San Francisco also covered in makeshift tents. More than 2 years later, many of those refugee camps were still in operation. And I'll tell you in just a second about some other structures that were created to house people after the earthquake. The earthquake and fire, did I say fire? Oh yeah, we're going to get to the fire. Don't you worry your pretty little head about that at all. Left significant impact on the development of California. Now, at the time of the disaster, San Francisco was the 9th largest city in the United States and the largest on the West Coast by far. As a matter of fact, if you watch old Westerns, San Francisco is the town they talk about, not Los Angeles. Los Angeles didn't explode until the 1920s or 1930s. This was a big city. And over a period of 60 years, the city became the financial, trade, and cultural center of the Western United States, with easily the busiest port. It was called the gateway to the Pacific. Now, San Francisco got rebuilt quickly. I'll get into that in just a second. But the disaster diverted trade, industry, and population growth to Los Angeles. This earthquake's actually responsible for the beginnings of the growth of Los Angeles, which in the 20th century became the most important city in the West. Many of the city's leading poets and writers and artists retreated to Carmel by the Sea, where they established the arts colony reputation that continues even to this day. Other cities were also affected. I mentioned some of those, Santa Rosa and the entire downtown. Santa Rosa was essentially destroyed. Now, this is a cover of the New York Times that came out. This is the evening edition in New York on the day of the earthquake, April 18th. So at that time, they knew there was over 500 dead, 200,000 lost in San Francisco, half the city in ruins, 50,000 homeless. That was a hopeful estimate. Water supply fails. Dynamite is used in vain. I will tell you about that in a second. You're not going to believe. The Palace Hotel, famous. The Mint, big buildings blown up. The thing in the middle here, though, that is what they called at the time an autograph. Yes, an autograph. And it is what measured the earthquake at that time. And so that shows you the intensity sort of and length of the earthquake as best as they could express it in the only real mass medium at the time, which was the newspaper. Now, as damaging, as just absolutely horrifyingly damaging as the earthquake was, what really destroyed the city was the fire. The fires that burned out of control afterward were way... Now, don't get me wrong. The earthquake destroyed a lot of things and likely would have devastated the city. But the fires, they're responsible for 80%, maybe 95% of the total destruction that happened. In other words, a house's foundation might have shifted, the front of the building might have fallen off, but that could have been repaired. No, the fires burnt everything to the ground. Within 3 days, over 30 fires, mainly caused by ruptured gas mains. Remember, San Francisco was a big modern city. So not only were there gas mains that people would use for whatever, there were gas mains going into homes, being used for stoves and heat. Approximately 25,000 buildings were destroyed over 490 city blocks. And these fires cost the city $350 million at the time, which is worth about $8.9 billion in 2023. That is what we would call severe damage, very severe damage. One of the fires is known as the Ham and Eggs Fire. On the morning of the 18th, at the corner of Hayes and Guff Streets in Hayes Valley, it was started by a woman who lit her stove to prepare breakfast, unaware of the badly damaged chimney in her home. That fire alone destroyed a 30-block area, including, very importantly, a college, but most importantly, it destroyed the city's Hall of Records and City Hall. So records of San Francisco before 1906, unless you had a copy of them and it wasn't destroyed in the fire. They don't exist anymore. Bye-bye. Some of the fires were started when and this is really, really bad, but it's what happened, so I'm going to tell you about it. Some of the fires were started when the San Francisco Fire Department firefighters, who were not trained in the use of dynamite, attempted actually a very smart thing. They wanted to demolish buildings in an attempt to create fire breaks. For those of you who don't know, even in forest fires, in order to stop a fire, they will plow over or blow up a whole section in front of the fire, the direction it's proceeding, in order to create an area where there's nothing to burn. And the firefighters said, we need to blow up a bunch of these buildings to create a fire break. Well, they weren't trained in how to use dynamite. So, number one, the dynamited buildings very often just caught fire, and they created more fire. And it's of significance that the city's fire chief, Dennis T. Sullivan, who would have been coordinating all these firefighting efforts, he's the chief. He's the guy that knows more than anybody else. Unfortunately, he had died from injuries sustained in the initial quake. Well, these fires burned for 4 days and for 4 nights. So let me just give you an example of how much damage these fires did. This is a map of the city, okay? You see that red section in the middle there? Yeah, that was all completely and totally burnt to the ground by the fires. And it's actually a little bit misleading because although that area is, for lack of a better term, scorched earth, the fires spread to the area that is the boundary there. So although it didn't destroy the areas outside of the red to the ground, they burned everywhere inside that red area in various intensities and in various places. So as you can see, the fire did much more of the damage than anything else. Now, most of the destruction in the city was attributed to the fires since, and this is kind of a thing the insurance companies did, and they were very nice about this actually. The widespread practice of insurance companies was to indemnify San Francisco properties from fire, but not from earthquake damage. So there was a lot of earthquake damage that was done that got kind of paid off under the heading of fire. And in fact, some property owners deliberately set fire to damaged property, right, to claim their insurance. Captain Leonard D. Wildman of the U.S. Army Signal Corps reported that he was stopped by a fireman who told him people in the neighborhood were burning their houses. They were told they wouldn't get insurance on buildings damaged by the earthquake unless they were damaged by fire. One of the big landmark buildings that was destroyed in the fire was the legendary Palace Hotel. Now, that Palace Hotel was subsequently rebuilt, and it does remain a landmark in the historic district of San Francisco. And it was the place, if you were royalty or a famous performer, that is where you would go to stay, okay? In fact, this is a famous story. The legendary tenor, operatic tenor, Enrico Caruso, famed for Pagliacci and other things, and members of the Metropolitan Opera Company, they came to San Francisco to give a series of performances at the Grand Opera House. The night after Caruso's performance in Carmen, you guys all know Carmen, right? Toreador, dun 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 dun. That's Carmen. The tenor was awakened in the early morning, this famous singer, in his Palace Hotel suite by a strong jolt. And Clutching an autographed photo of President Theodore Roosevelt, Caruso made an effort to get out of the city. He tried getting out by boat. That didn't work. Then he tried by train. That never worked. He did finally get out, and he vowed never to return to San Francisco again. He was so devastated by the experience and what was happening to the city. He died, did Enrico Caruso, in 1921, having remained true to his word. Yes. By the way, the Metropolitan Opera Company, which was New York's opera company and recognized as the finest in the United States, they traveled to San Francisco. They're putting on this big show. They lost all of their sets and costumes in the earthquake and the ensuing fires. Why don't I get to some of your comments here real quickly? Because that's what I do. And I'll just put another photo of devastation up there while I do that. Oh, by the way, please like. Right now, man, hit that like button. Please share. Tell all your friends. They're helpful people. Notification bell, retweet, subscribe. We need those subscriptions very badly because they help us with the algorithm, the almighty algorithm. And we need to try and grow this thing a little bit. The other thing about it is we do have memberships and we do have super chats. And it's the last day of the month. I won't get into the San Francisco fire devastated the city. The month of March here has devastated the Tom Gulley Show. And admittedly, my show is a bigger disaster than the San Francisco fire of 1906. But anything you can do for us here on the last day of the month would be warmly appreciated. Helps us pay the bills around here. I want to start doing shorts, but to do that, I have to buy another platform of conversion. So you don't care, but anything you could do would be helpful, A, to the show, and B, to my ego. Last but not least, in the scroll at the bottom of the screen, you can see what I call the begging bar, where I direct you to our merchandise store and other things. But it does tell you at the very end of that scroll how to turn on your gifted memberships, because very generous, wonderful, philanthropic people, much like you will find out the world was to the city of San Francisco, they will gift you a membership to the Tom Gulley Show. And then you'll get to get that members-only exclusive content like we did yesterday, 2 hours. And you got to hear that expert on Lenny Bruce that I called up that had left me a message. And he went on and on and on about what a great job we did on the Lenny Bruce Show. And that was warmly appreciated. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get to your comments, because that's what's really important. Coach Mike says, I've been in a few 10-second earthquakes, 42-second one would probably be unsettling. Especially, it's not just the length. It's that it was an intensity of 7.7. That's a humdinger. That's a humdinger. The Wolf is here. He says, hello, everyone. Hello, Wolf. How you doing? People saying hi. People saying hi. People saying hi. We do have the most cheerful chat room on the internet, as verified by independent sources. And then, oh, man, thank you, Wolf. Look at that. Hello, Daddy. I want a bush baby. This is the simpatico the Wolf and I had. I knew he wanted that done in not just a British voice, but a British voice in high register, like the little girl in 2001: A Space Odyssey. I knew. I just knew. I instinctively knew. Chef says, I shared with 20 of my friends. Chef, you're a good man. You are such a good man. I do appreciate you. I really do. You're a fine man. And if I ever, and I'm sure I will at some point, return to my ancestral home of Indianapolis, you will certainly find out about it, and we will get together, and I will allow you to cook things for me. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix this guy. I cleaned up a lot of my. There we go. Maybe that's better now. No, see, I overdid it. That's what the problem is. I overdone it a little bit. I overdone it. That's about right. That'll be good. That's fine. Why did I even mess with it to begin with? People saying hello. There we go. People saying hello. Share between people saying hi. People saying hi. People saying hi. Oh, Pepe Sylvia. Sorry. Are you related to Tim Sylvia? I think it's spelled differently. With the salute. I'm saluting you straight back, sir. Thank you so much, Pepe. I just like it that you make the show peppy. 5-star days ahead. I don't know what that means, but it just sounds cool. It just, now see, that's way too much headroom. I don't know what's going on here with this. Let me see if that'll do it. I guess that's fine right there. Yeah, the 5-star days ahead it just sounds cool. I would give you the point, Pepe and Wolf. There's only one problem. I have got so many pictures loaded here that I can't give you the point. There's no more room in my media storage. So I'm just going to, wait, I think it's like, that's the point. And then I'll give you the point also with the power ring for doing that. There's the point with the power ring. Matter of fact, I'll just give you the power ring right there. Let's see if it'll hone in. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Oh God, look at that. Come on. Be good to daddy. There we go. Look at that. Oh, it had it for a second. Come on, man. Come on, man. Don't harsh out my show. Come on. Get it. Do it. Come on now. Daggone it. Let's see if it'll do it like this. All right, it's not doing it, so we're going to stop that. It got it for a second. Chef says he'd be honored to cook for me. Well, I can't come to the country club. I'm not a member. But by the same token, we could all go to Nova Romans. Funky Bronco says, "Hey, Wolfie, how are you?" And that's a bromance that we dare not. Yeah. Some of the very greatest losses from the fire were in scientific laboratories. Alice Eastwood. Yes, there's a woman named Alice Eastwood. She was the curator of botany at the California Academy of Sciences, and she saved nearly 1,500 specimens, including entire newly discovered and extremely rare species of plants that had never been seen before. And the remainder of what at the time was the largest botanical collection in the western United States was destroyed in the fire. Other than the 1,500, she said everything else was destroyed. There was a biochemist named Benjamin R. Jacobs who was researching the nutrition of everyday foods, which was a big deal at this time, at sort of the turn of the century. People were looking to what you're eating and the health benefits of that. Everything, all of his research, everything destroyed. The original state of California flag, the very first flag that they used in the state of California, the 1946 bear flag thing, it was stored in a state building in San Francisco, destroyed in the fire. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put up a picture here. I'm not going to explain it for a second because it's horrifying, but I am going to leave it up there so you can get an idea of the fire and what was going on in the city at the time. I mentioned earlier that Dennis T. Sullivan, the fire chief of San Francisco, he was gravely injured when the earthquake first struck, and he died from those injuries. The interim fire chief sent a request to the army post in an area of San Francisco, called the Presidio. You see it in a lot of movies and stuff. The Presidio is a section of San Francisco. But there was a U.S. Army post on the edge of the Presidio and sort of at the edge of the city, and he wanted dynamite. Well, General Frederick Funston of the U.S. Army had already decided that the situation required the use of federal troops, and so he sent word to the mayor of his decision to assist, and then he ordered federal troops from nearby Angel Island to mobilize and enter the city. And he brought explosives with him across the bay from the California Powder Works in what's now Hercules, California. For the first few days, the soldiers provided valuable services, like they patrolled the streets to discourage looting. They guarded buildings, one of which was the U.S. Mint. The post office also was guarded, in the county jail. They helped the fire department into dynamiting and demolished buildings in the path of the fires. See, the Army actually had people that knew how to blow up buildings and use dynamite. The Army also became responsible for feeding, sheltering, and clothing the tens of thousands of people displaced in the city. Under the command of the superior to General Funston, Major General Adolphus Greeley. Is it me, or did all of the military people back in the days have names like Funston and Adolphus Greeley? Just seems like an old general name. Commanding officer of the Pacific Division was Major General Adolphus Greeley, and he had over 4,000 troops he serviced during the emergency. Police officers, firefighters, and soldiers would regularly commandeer passing civilians for work details to remove rubble and assist in rescues. So you could just be walking down the street. Maybe you were going to try and find a sandwich or whatever you were doing, and they go, "You there, get over here. Help us remove this rubble." Several months later, on July the 1st, 1906, non-military authorities assumed responsibility for the relief efforts, and the Army left town. Now, on April 18th, the day of the earthquake, in response to riots among the evacuees and looting in the city, okay, so very quickly, this just nailed the city. And so people immediately are displaced from their homes. They have children. They want food. They need water. And so there's rioting and looting going on. If you had a store that survived it all, man, we're going to riot and loot and get everything out of it. The Mayor Schmitz, issued an order, posted a proclamation basically that said the federal troops, the members of the regular police force, and all special police officers have been authorized by me to kill any and all persons found engaged in looting or in the commission of any other crime. And if you look before you, you will see an example of what I'm about to tell you. Accusations of soldiers engaging in looting began to surface. Retired Captain Edward Ord of the 22nd Infantry Regiment was appointed a special police officer by the mayor and kind of was a liaison to Adolphus Greeley for relief work with the 22nd Infantry and other military units. He later wrote in a long letter to his mother on April 20th, just 2 days after the earthquake, regarding Schmidt's shoot-to-kill order and some despicable behavior of certain soldiers of the 22nd Infantry who were, in fact, looting. He also made it clear that the majority of soldiers served the community well. The photo you see before you now is of soldiers actually looting in the middle of the streets of San Francisco, and they're doing it amidst, as you can see in the background, a huge fire, a gigantic fire. So yeah, that did go down. Now let's talk about the aftermath a little bit here. This is evacuees leaving the city. Look at that mess. These are people just saying, forget it, I'm leaving. And it was almost impossible to leave. You know, the city is famous for its cable cars. I have some photos. Maybe I'll I'll show you here in a second of cable cars and tracks that they're not any good anymore. Thank you very much. They're just not any good anymore. Property losses from the disaster are estimated to be more than $400 million in 1906 dollars. That's about $10.2 billion in 2023 dollars. Importantly, and insurance industry sources tallied the losses at $235 million, the equivalent to about $6 billion in 2023 dollars. So even in 1906, the real world was saying, well, my stuff got damaged, it was worth this much, and the insurance companies were flying in and going, no, it's worth a lot less than that. I'm just kidding. Just some good-natured ribbing with the insurance industry. Now, political and business leaders, unbelievably, they downplayed the effects of the earthquake. By the way, this here is a view from the Ferry Building Tower on Southwest Market Street. And I show you this just to show you there's nothing happening. If you look to the north there, so to speak, it's just devastation and rubble. And if you have a horse or a cart, you can't go that way. You can see the one cable car there. It has nowhere to go forward. And the only way to go is backwards towards fire and devastation. So also not a great choice. So the city leaders, political and business leaders, they kind of wanted to say, hey, this earthquake's not so bad. We're good. And the reason they did that was they were fearful that they wouldn't get outside investment to help the city recover. They knew they badly were going to have to rebuild the whole city pretty much from the ground up. And they're like, well, if we make this seem super bad, people won't want to give their money. They won't want to start over from scratch. And in the first public statement the California governor, George Pardee, made, he, though, emphasized the need to rebuild it quickly. He says, this is not the first time that San Francisco has been destroyed by fire. I have not the slightest doubt that the city of the Golden Gate will be speedily rebuilt and will, almost before we know it, resume her former great activity. The earthquake isn't even mentioned in his statement. Didn't even say a word about it. It's all about fire. And by the way, they manipulated the fatality figures and the monetary damage estimates, which is why they later on had to say, no, this was really 3,000 people. They tried to make it seem like less so they get the money they needed to rebuild. Now, so almost immediately after the earthquake, and even during the entire ongoing disaster of fire and evacuation, all that, they were planning ways to quickly rebuild the city. And the problem was the funds to do that were immediately tied up by the fact that virtually all the major banks in the city had been sites where the earthquake had hit or the fires had hit. And get this, they had to wait 7 to 10 days before their fireproof vaults would cool down sufficiently to be safely opened. The fire had gotten them so hot, they weren't going to be able to open them even for 7 to 10 days. Now, the Bank of Italy, which is now known as the Bank of America, had evacuated its funds and was able to provide some liquid, currency and money in the immediate wake of the disaster. Its president also immediately chartered, this guy was smart. He chartered and financed 2 ships to go to Washington and Oregon lumber mills and bring back huge sums of wood so that the initial reconstruction would have materials, because all the lumber yards in San Francisco, I don't know, I'm no scientist, but fire, lumber, I think you see where I'm headed here. In an article written in 1913, one of the first guys to study the San Andreas Fault, John Branner, he complained that the federal government had not conducted serious studies that were needed to gather data about earthquakes of the West Coast. And he said that discussion of this sort of thing was stifled because business owners, investors, and people, they didn't want that kind of talk. They're like, yeah, you want to quiet down about that because people will quit coming here. If you're quakey, we don't really want to. Could you just maybe just a little? And so he basically said, we need to rebuild the city, but we need to do it intelligently. We need to be aware of the fact that an earthquake could strike at any time. And when we reconstruct the city, we need to build these buildings in such a fashion that they're not going to catch on fire. And we need to do things to these gas mains which will ensure that they won't burn down the city. And so that also was incorporated into the rebuilding plans, and pretty smart to do so. Now, I'm going to tell you just a couple of things, and then we'll get to more of your comments here very quickly. 11 days after the earthquake, something happened in New York City, and that was a very rare Sunday baseball game. Okay, New York City didn't even allow Sunday baseball until 1919, but they made an exception on this day. A game between the Highlanders, which very soon would be renamed the New York Yankees, and the Philadelphia Athletics, the Philadelphia A's, which would later move to Kansas City and then finally to Oakland and now to Las Vegas. That game was to raise money for the survivors of the earthquake. Okay? A famous American psychologist who was teaching at Stanford traveled to San Francisco to see the aftermath of the earthquake a couple weeks later, and he was blown away by the positive attitude of the survivors and the speed with which they improvised services and basically made order out of chaos, found ways to open up markets for food and set up areas that the army supplied all sorts of supplies, including food. They created their own little society over again. Okay? Now, H.G. Wells, the famous science fiction writer, he had just arrived in New York on his first visit to America when he learned of the San Francisco earthquake. And what struck him the most was the reaction of those around him, saying that people in the United States had this amazing sense of optimism. Yes, it was devastating to them, but unlike Europe, where he was from, England, there was no foreboding or a fear of like this irreparable disaster. Everyone is like talking about it like, we can rebuild this. They will rebuild this. They will get to redo their whole city. You know, they will do this. They will rebuild the railroad. They will build it larger, better, and soon. And that basically, he said, I believe these people would more than half like being in this situation to completely reset their destiny and rebuild their city in a better vision of what it was to begin with, which is exactly what San Francisco did. I'm going to take some of your comments right now, but before I do, I feel like this earthquake thing is kind of a downer, maybe a little bit, if you put yourself in that situation, and I bet it was. I don't even bet it was. I know it was. However, out of chaos sometimes comes comedy. And I found this photo. Yes, this is an actual statue that was apparently on top of this building. And during the earthquake, it fell off. And in an almost Monty Python-like fashion, I'll keep that there for you just so you can smile and laugh. Let's see what we got. Chef said, I will make soup for you. Chef is having some fun, because Chef is a longtime member of the show, and he is aware of the fact that I hate soup. And therefore, that's why Dupa is laughing at him. I love the members of our show, and I love our chat room. Funky, bad is bad. The Chicken Dance Live. As usual, Funky Bronco wanting to have a completely different discussion, side discussion, having nothing to do with the show. And Funky, been nice knowing you. Really has. Wolf doesn't have a favorite. See, the Wolf's trying to kind of be like, hey, man, chill out a little bit. Funky, I heartily recommend that you contact the Wolf privately, and you guys can you can ask Wolf all the side questions you want, and have Wolf worship somewhere other than the chat room. Because, and I don't mean to sound ominous here, one day you may not have chat room privileges. I'm being very patient. Don't be using my chat room as your personal direct message platform. I grow weary. Julian Caesar says earthquake-prone areas are afraid of masonry buildings, but then the wooden buildings burn, stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're very correct, Julian Caesar. Now, although the city of San Francisco does have a lot of very tall buildings now, right after the earthquake, they made the decision that we're not going to build them perhaps as tall as they were. And they did learn some things about weight-bearing walls. And I mean, I'm not saying they make them earthquake-proof, because there's no such thing as an earthquake-proof building. But they did make improvements. And they did figure out how to spread the city out better, and where to put parks that were automatically a natural fire break. And they were just able to more intelligently reform the city with certain attributes of it remaining the same. I can tell you that Chinatown, the city fathers wanted to move Chinatown to the very northern edge of the boundary. And they weren't saying we want to get rid of Chinatown. They're saying, let's put it here instead. And the people from Chinatown kind of went, no, we like where we are in the western part of the city, and we want to stay there. And they kind of prevailed in that discussion. So it also allowed for a little give and take. Wolf says, we just use earthquake metal, Julian. Chef says, sorry, buddy, gotta go, everybody. Say goodnight, Gracie. Good night, Gracie. Good to see you, Chef. The earthquake actually was crucial for the development of the University of California, San Francisco, and its medical facilities. So the school faculty had provided care at the City County Hospital, now San Francisco General, but it didn't have a hospital of its own. And following the earthquake, about 40,000 people were relocated to a makeshift tent city in Golden Gate Park, and were treated by the faculty of the affiliated colleges. Now, this brought the school, remember, they have no hospital of their own, which until then was on the western outskirts of the city, in contact with a lot of the population, because they didn't have a hospital. They didn't really treat people, okay? And that, in turn, made civic leaders go, hey, this school here is a major asset to us. And that built the momentum for them to construct their own healthcare facilities. And in 1907, one of the buildings from the fire was renovated with outpatient care with 75 beds. And they used that to train nursing students and doctors. But the UC Training School for Nurses was established there, as well as a fourth professional school for the affiliated colleges there in San Francisco. Eastern sources were required for money to rebuild all this stuff. And tough new building codes were established. And subsequent low death toll kind of figures were a result of them trying to get this Eastern money. It also drew the attention of a very famed urban planner named Daniel Hudson Burnham. And he's been called the most successful power broker the American architectural profession has ever produced. His plan called for avenues, boulevards, arterial thoroughfares that radiated across the city, a massive civic center complex with classical structures, and what would have been the urban park that was unrivaled in the world, stretching from Twin Peaks to Lake Merced with this big Athenaeum at its peak. But they kind of dismissed this plan. They didn't really like it because it would have required the city to purchase too much land. So they kind of restored the grid of the city, the streets. But many of Burnham's proposals did see the light of day, like a large civic center complex, wider streets, which he had advocated, a preference for certain arterial thoroughfares being wider and having more appropriate structures for busy buildings on the more busy streets. Subway under Market Street, that was his idea. A more people-friendly Fisherman's Wharf. Of course, Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco to this day remains an incredible tourist attraction. And that was Daniel Burnham's idea. He said, you've got this wharf for fishermen. It's amazing, and it does so much business. Why don't you make that available to the public? That was his idea. And the monument to the city on Telegraph Hill, Coit Tower, which remains to this day. Limestone used to reconstruct the city buildings was quarried at nearby Rockaway Quarry. I got to think some came from the famous Indiana limestones, but I'm just saying that. I don't know that for sure. I mentioned the city fathers wanting to move the Chinese population and export Chinatown to the edge of the county where they could contribute to the local tax base, but they would sort of keep them off to the side. The Chinese occupants said, no, we're not doing that. But Chinatown was rebuilt in a newer, more modern part of the western part of the city that remains to this day. The destruction of City Hall and the Hall of Records enabled thousands of Chinese immigrants to claim residency and citizenship, creating a backdoor to the Chinese Exclusion Act and bringing their relatives in from China. The earthquake was also responsible for the development of the Pacific Heights neighborhood because all the old mansions on Nob Hill, they'd been destroyed, but ones that weren't destroyed were dynamited by the army looking to create those fire breaks. So the wealthy people looked westward, where the land was cheap and highly undeveloped, and where there were better views of the ocean and the city. And so they constructed new mansions without reclaiming and clearing rubble, and simply sped up getting their homes there during the reconstruction. The reconstruction of San Francisco was very fast. And it was totally completed by 1915, in time for the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition, which celebrated the reconstruction of the city. Now, that's only 9 years to completely redo one of the most glorious cities in the history of the United States, which is really, really pretty fast. So in a minute, I'm going to get to some more of your comments here real quick. Please like, please share, please, all of those things. Please subscribe, please like. We need those the worst. Those don't cost you a penny, right? I know you're watching this now and you're thinking, who would pay for this? I know, I don't blame you. But if you decided to take pity on me, we do have memberships, we do have super chats, and then that helps us pay the bills. And then if you wanted to, you could gift memberships. Even if you don't want to gift a membership to somebody, which is the most humanitarian thing you could do, even more humanitarian than helping rebuild the destroyed city of San Francisco back in 1906, you can turn on, it'll tell in the scroll at the bottom of the screen, turn on your gifted memberships. Somebody might gift you one. We just had a members-only show yesterday, and it was glorious. Glorious. Now, let's talk a little bit about housing, because we're getting to the end here. And I think this is very, very, very important. The Army built This is incredible. The Army built 5,610 redwood and fir, what they called relief houses. You see them, they're real close to each other. And they accommodated about 20,000 displaced people. They were designed by John McLaren. John McLaren was the superintendent of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And there were 11 camps for these particular structures. They were packed very closely together, as you can see. And they were rented to people, forget this, $2 per month until the rebuilding was completed. They were painted navy blue. Why? Well, mostly to blend in with the site, but partly because the military just happened to have large quantities of navy blue paint hanging around. The camps had a peak population of 16,448 people, but by 1907, okay, just a year later, most people had moved out. The camps were then reused as garages, storage spaces, or shops. They cost about $100 a piece to build. The $2 monthly rents actually went toward the full purchase price. You could actually purchase one of these babies for $50. And the last official refugee camp was closed June 30th, 1908. Now, most of these cottages have been destroyed, but at least 30 of them have actually survived. Here are two of them. Now, you remember, these are 1906 built structures, right? There is these two historically restored in the Presidio. Others have been built on as part of private homes, with a high concentration of them in an area called Bernal Heights. One of the modest 720 square foot homes was purchased in 2006 for more than $600,000. And even though there's only 30 of these remaining, some of them were like sort of gradually upgraded throughout the 100 years, right? So the main structure and frame and design remains, but they kind of improved on it along the way. And that $620,000 version is now part of a private home. So it's kind of what they call an in-law house, a grandma, whatever they call it. There's a million names for them. But that one there, you know, they put some shaker shingles on it, and it looks kind of good. I think that's the same window diameter. It might be. I don't know. Maybe they've done some substantial work for it. But these do still kind of hang around there. There's still some of them. A 2017 study found that the fire had the effect of increasing the share of land used for non-residential purposes. So after the fire, residential land on all of the burned blocks didn't get restored to residences, okay? That basically turned into non-residential type structures. And that's why the residential areas kind of moved away from the downtown, right? That makes any sense. During the first few days after news of the disaster reached the rest of the world, relief efforts reached over $5 million, which is about $175 million of 2024 money. London raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Individual citizens and businesses donated large sums of money for the relief effort. Standard Oil and Andrew Carnegie each gave $100,000. The Dominion of Canada made a special appropriation of $100,000. Even the Bank of Canada in Ottawa gave $25,000. The U.S. government quickly voted for $1 million in relief supplies, which were immediately rushed to the area, including supplies for food kitchens and many thousands of tents that city dwellers would occupy for the next several years. Those relief efforts, though, were not enough to get families on their feet again, and consequently the burden was placed on wealthy members of the city of San Francisco, who were reluctant to assist in the rebuilding of homes they were not responsible for. So all eligible people, and that means all residents. All residents were actually eligible for daily meals served from a number of communal soup kitchens as citizens as far away as Idaho and Utah were known to send daily loaves of bread to San Francisco as relief supplies were coordinated by the railroads. So the railroads would have a special car on them, no matter where they were coming to. And keep in mind, the entire nation's railroads were coming to San Francisco. When they stopped in certain towns, people would show up with baked loaves of bread and other things and just pile it into the car on a daily basis. They'd ship it off to San Francisco. I won't get too much into the insurance payments, but insurance companies had claims of about $250 million, and they paid out between $235 and $265 million on policyholders' claims, often for fire damage only, since, as I mentioned, earthquake damage was usually excluded from policies in San Francisco. 137 insurance companies were directly involved, and 20 companies just went bankrupt. Lloyd's of London paid all of its claims in full, up to $50 million. And, Aetna was involved. Hartford was involved. The insurance payments, though, did heavily affect international finances. Gold transfers from European insurance companies to policyholders in San Francisco led to a rise in insurance rates and subsequently to a lack of available loans. So there was actually a panic in 1907 due to the lack of availability of funds. There are some centennial sort of celebrations that happen for the great earthquake. 11 survivors of the 1906 earthquake attracted the centennial commemorations in 2006. So you had, Irma May Wheeler, that was 7 years old when it happened, and she actually lived another 2 years after the 2006 centennial. Oldest survivor of the quake at the time of her death, aged 109. Vivian Illing, who was born in 1900, was believed to be the second oldest survivor at the time of her death, aged 108, leaving Herbert Hamrell, 1903, is the last known remaining survivor at the time of his death in 2009 at age 106. Why do I feel like Willard Scott all of a sudden? Smucker says happy birthday to Herbert Hamrell. Another survivor, Libera Armstrong, who was born in 1902, attended the 2006 anniversary but died in 2007 at a young 105 years old. Two additional survivors were discovered. One was 103, 106, stating they stopped attending events commemorating the earthquake when it became too much trouble for them, which makes sense. I won't get into the rest of them. There's actually quite a number of others that have their own little stories and whatnot. But the last thing I'm going to show you is some photos from what they call the Willard Warden Gallery. Now, working to establish his career as a photographer in San Francisco, a man by the name of Willard Warden, who would end up becoming a renowned photographer. He seized this opportunity to capture history in the making, and he recorded scenes of the fire and its aftermath using a handheld film camera and a 4x5-inch view camera with glass negatives. And he also photographed damage to the Stanford University campus. The resulting work fed the general public's fascination for what they viewed at the time as sensational content, but it was also of interest to seismologists, architects, and urban planners. It was a very good record of what had happened there. After the destruction, all that remained of the Albin End Town Mansion on Nob Hill were 6 marble columns and what they call a lintel. A lintel. That's this photo right here. When viewed from a certain angle, the empty porch perfectly frames the ruins of the smoldering city hall. The haunting image became an icon of the 1906 earthquake, due largely to photographs by William Worden. In 1909, the columns in Lindell were relocated to Golden Gate Park, where, known as portals of the past, they became an enduring monument to the city's grief and a symbol of its endurance. So there you are. Here's a few other William Worden photos that are frankly amazing. They're just amazing. This is a William Worden photo, and this to me really shows the devastation that occurred, because most of it, as you can see, is rubble. And the buildings there, you can see the scorch fire damage on that large column in the middle, and you can also see that it's listing very badly. The rest of the buildings also look burnt out and decayed. If you look at the building that's in the middle, so to speak, 2/3 of the way to the left, you can see through those windows. So it's like these buildings have kind of been gutted. And the same is true of some of the other columns and buildings that remain. But look at the ground there. It's nothing but a patchwork of charred pieces of wood and rubble and destruction. Everywhere you look, there is something that is just horribly destroyed and burned. And William Worden captured that very, very, very well. Here's another William Worden photo, and this one shows the damage to what street? Union Street. And as you know, cable cars, even during that time, were a big part of San Francisco. Well, if you can see, and I think it's a bit misleading, how large this street has kind of been twisted. That is a cable car that's not going to run anymore. As you can see, the two tracks of the cable car, look at the cobblestones that have fallen away from it, 2-3 feet anyway. That's going to take a lot of work. And if you look to the left, you've got more destruction and damage, right? But look to the right and in the sky. That is showing those fires that are just raging completely out of control. Okay? That's some serious stuff there. That's some very, very serious stuff going on. Some other photography that I think of is of note and that you might like to see is this particular panorama. This is the fire going on at its height. That's not smoldering. That's the actual fire. And you can see this was taken from the hill, and it was taken by one of those cameras that does left to right, you know, in a panorama form to make the whole photo. It's basically two lenses is what it is, or at least the photo is being projected onto two different pieces of film, which are then joined together. Probably just one lens. The deal is, though, that look at how that city is burning to the ground. Absolutely burning to the ground. Now, this one doesn't depict it quite as well, but this is a shot of the city of San Francisco after the fires, and it's shot from the wharf section. I guess the best thing that you can see about this is the areas near sort of the water, which would be on this map, you know, toward the bay side. And you can see that it's sort of the far upper left, that some of this stuff did kind of survive. I think that's the bay side. I could be wrong about that. Some resident could tell me. Or it could be down toward the bottom there, where the fires didn't affect it quite as much. But this particular photo does show, you see that in the sort of 2/3 over to the left, there are some structures kind of remaining. But if you look to the right-hand side and back, you know, toward the top of the picture, you see that whole area, and that's what leads me to believe that this is probably the lower section of that map I just showed you. That's the area the fire hit, and it is flat. There is nothing left there. Amazingly, this is a very artistic photo with the light shining at the top and whatnot. And you can still see either clouds or some of the up to the bottom right, some of the smoke. But that area, as I mentioned earlier, 2/3 to the right and toward the top of the photo, as you can see, it is just flat. It has just been burned to the ground. And there's other areas to that top of the photo that are the same way. So there you are there. What else do I have here? This is another photo that is a William Worden. Is this a William Worden? No, it's not. I showed you that photo earlier, I believe. I thought I had one other William Worden photo here somewhere. Or maybe I just haven't shown this photo yet. But that shows you some of the destruction. And this area, you know, probably totally destroyed, but not at least burnt to the ground like some of the others. Let me see. I thought I had one more William Worden photo here. I guess I don't. I do have some. I do have some others. If I get rid of some of these, why don't I just go ahead and get rid of some of them and see if I can bring the others on board real quickly, which I can. Just take a second here. There's a surprising amount of photography that still exists from this disaster. And much of it is very, very good, which isn't always the case. It is not always the case. I think I have this one here. Maybe it'll automatically put it up on screen. I don't know. Yes, it will. There's another panoramic shot. And look at this is the city in full fire. This is the city burning to the ground. It is not a great crisp shot, but that gives you an idea of the massive nature of this fire. It is just absolutely awe-striking. It's just beyond the imagination. And if you're anywhere near it, you know, regardless of the danger, if you're blocks from it, if you're half a mile from it, it just has to be the most intimidating thing that you have ever seen in your entire life. Let's see here. Let me take a quick look at this one before I put it up. I might have showed you this one. Oh no, I haven't shown you this one. This is a really good one. This is after some of the destruction, but this is a William Worden as well. And okay, I can't share this many photos. God, I hate StreamYard. Can only share 10 at a time. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's what every single content creator wants to hear. That's got to share a new image. Please remove one. I've already removed them. Sorry. I've already removed a ton of these. Let me just try it again. That's the one I'm showing. Let me get rid of this one. StreamYard, thank you. You're always helping me. You never fail to help me, StreamYard. You are constantly trying to make my show better and to provide people with just a wonderful experience. You are really the greatest thing ever that's happened to content creation. Yeah, look at that. This is in the aftermath. You can still see that the skies are very, you know, there's still smoldering going on here, but you can also see that much of the rubble has been removed, that people are walking sort of along the sides of the streets where you can see rubble has been moved from the middle and off to the side at least. And, you know, that they've attempted at least to get some of this stuff out of the way. Let me see. I've actually got a picture or two more that I might as well go ahead and try to show you, since I've went to the trouble and since StreamYard wants me to show them so badly. I really want to say ahead sometimes. Let's see here. Market Street is the observatory in ruins. That's already shown that one. Let's see. Let me see this one right here. Let me see this one right here. If I've shown, oh no, I've showed you that one. Let's see if I've showed you this one. Come on now. Come on now, StreamYard. Anyway, you can kind of tell. Oh, yeah, I haven't shown you this one. This will do just fine. This is another panorama. And, oh, wait, did I show you this one already? Yeah, I think I did show you this one already. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm sorry for inadvertently showing you too many scenes of destruction from San Francisco. I think I'll just put that one up there and get through to some of your comments as I wrap this up. If you go to Wikipedia, there are a number of panoramas and the William Worden photos and stuff that are just too thin to show on this screen, even if I blow them up. But if you download them, they're very expansive. They're wider. They're at a resolution that they're so wide that they would only be this tall on my screen. But if you do it on your computer screen, you can blow them up and go section by section much easier and see them in great detail, if indeed that's something that you're interested in doing. And it is pretty interesting. There's photos of the aftermath that are amazing. And there's just some really good photo documentation of what happened here. Let's see here. Earthquake medal. Sorry, I got to go. Good night, Chef. The wolf lives on the San Andreas Fault. I thought you caused the San Andreas Fault. I thought it was your fault. People saying good night. Oh, wolf deer, have you experienced an earthquake? Oh, yes. The wolf has been through any natural disaster that's ever occurred. The wolf has been through it, I guarantee you. I guess you just get used to it. Apparently so. Usually the quakes are a few miles away. I heard someone tell me once, and I kind of believe this, people from the Midwest, like the wolf and myself, we are fearful and respectful of tornadoes, but we've lived through tornado activity. So we're not like, we know what to do. It's intimidating, particularly when they're close and all that stuff. But if you know what to do, if you get under the ground in a deep shelter and all that stuff, you know, there's obviously no universal protection from it, but you can, you know, take cover. We're terrified of earthquakes. I'm terrified of earthquakes. We had an earthquake one time, I think I mentioned it on the show or yesterday during the members only show, that I was in a 2.3 in Fort Wayne. I was up late one last night and my computer screen started rocking and my blinds started going back and forth. And it was only for about 15 seconds. And it was enough that I got up and went to the window. And when I did, it was like I was on a surfboard or something. I was like, hey, I don't like this. And I thought it was it was a train tracks that was about a block or half a block from my house, which would come by and I'd barely take notice of it. But I thought maybe there was a derailment or something. And I went and looked. And then by the time I got back to my computer, the lights flickered a little bit and stuff. And about 20 minutes later, I saw, no, there was indeed an earthquake. And I wanted no part of that. I was terrified of it. People from out there have gotten used to earthquakes to some degree, or at least the activity, and it doesn't freak them out nearly as bad. But they're terrified of tornadoes, absolutely scared out of it. So it's sort of a reversal. I know that my uncle, this is a famous Gulley family story. Why don't you all settle back and I'll tell you a famous story from the Gulley family, from the Gulley family chronicles. All right, here you go. You're going to love this. I think this was during the very early 70s. I had an uncle that had went out to California. He was kind of a hippie, a little bit of a hippie guy, you know, and he'd been in the Navy and got out, and he was out in California. He'd met a girl. We Gullies are famous for we meet a girl and we fall in love like other people. And He said he woke up one morning and his bed was just dancing across the floor. Dancing across the floor. And he got up, called a member of the family, I won't mention who, and said, "Can you send me $50? I want to get a new pair of shoes," because he was a hippie. He probably just had, thongs or sandals, and get back to Indiana. I am not doing this again. And he was out of there. They Western Union the money, and he was home in no time. In no time. So anyway, I don't know if that's the way. I know the wolf probably feels differently about it than that, because the wolf's kind of indestructible. History has taught us anything. But I know a lot of people that do feel that very same way. Anyway, Wolf says, Dupa, it's more like you realize there's nothing you can do about it. Exactly. Julian Zezer says that these look like Monopoly houses. I don't know that I disagree with them, or certainly these look like Monopoly houses. That's a little bit accurate. 720 square feet, though. It's like they were doing the tiny house before the tiny house. And, frankly, a little 720 square foot house, that's kind of a cool little kitschy thing from back then, $1 million. Yes, well, Julian Zeter says that picture was taken from an airship, according to the legend. Yes, the picture overlooking the city, which I had to get rid of in my media because, of course, StreamYard. Yeah, it apparently was taken from an airship. I think it had to have been a dirigible of some kind because it's so steady. And photography of that era, you needed something steady. Some of the photographs are amazing. A dirigible or a hot air balloon or something. Some of the photographs are amazing. Aren't they, though? Aren't they, though? And there's even more than that. Dan Cockrell, I think he either lives in or used to live in the greatest city, America's greatest place to live, home of your 39 straight time girls state champion swimming team. I don't know, do you still live there, Dan, or did you move somewhere where the property rates or property taxes are lower? You got to pay for all that stuff they built. Anyway, let's see. People saying hi. Wolf is a natural disaster. Well, he is a force of nature of some kind. Whether it's a disaster or one of the wonders of the world, I don't know. I don't know. Wolf versus earthquake, my money's on Wolf. That's all I got to say. Scranton, not Scranton. Carmel, Indiana, home of champions. Home of 179 state champions. Thank you. The 2020, I want to say Max Prep's public school athletic program of the year nationally. We're good at stuff. We're good at stuff. I don't know why, but we are. We are. Ted Allen from Chopped. For those of you who watch the Food Network, yep, Carmel High School graduate. Who's the broadcasters? It's Sage Steele. I want to make sure and get her. Yes, Sage Steele, also Carmel High School graduate. And then when you combine it with Ball State, it's just unstoppable. Yeah. Dave Dugan, well-known comic, also. And it's Carmel, Indiana. Carmel by the Corn Patch, the Golden Ghetto. And then there's Carmel by the sea. It's all differentiated. So anyway, I think that's all of our comments thus far. I will open the phone lines for 5 minutes. Then I will close them. And then we'll all go on our way. Tomorrow, we will be doing Richard Pryor. I'm still waiting to see if I have a guest Wednesday. If I get done with this program and there's nothing about a guest on, well, I don't have to do that. I can do it while the phone lines are opening up. Real quickly here. Oh, I want to look at that. Hold on, let me open this up, and I can tell you whether we're going to have a guest on Wednesday or not. Because I won't, if it's not by tomorrow, you know. Some of these people, even though this show gets absolutely no viewers, I don't mind acting all high and mighty as if it does. And I don't see anything here. So I got to start planning a Wednesday show. I can't just wait. So Wednesday, I don't know what we're doing. Thursday, we're doing vampires. And Friday, we are doing pretzels. And I will dive deep into each one of those things. But tomorrow night is, of course, Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor will be the focus of our program tomorrow. Can you dig it? I knew that you could. I knew that you could. So let's get that off the screen. Let's make me that way. Let's make me that way. Hope you're all having a good time. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Those are all free things. They mean so very much to me. They deeply do. They deeply do. And they don't cost you nothing but a click, and they help us out a lot. Super chats, memberships, man, we would love to be doing better at that. Number one, to help us pay the bills around here. It actually does cost, actually, I added it up. It's a lot more than I thought to do this show. And then turn on your gifted memberships, man. Turn them on. If you can like share one of the shows you think is good, then with your friends on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that would be helpful. You don't even have to say that you like it. You don't even have to say this is, hey, I like this show. It's pretty. You can just say, look at this. Do you believe this? It's kind of like roadkill. You don't want to look at it, but you can't take your eyes away. Dan Cockrell says, still in Carmel by the highway. How did you and the Wolf meet? Did you go to the same high school there where DePauw is, or did you guys meet at Ball State? Or maybe both. Who knows? Hard to say. Hard to say. Hard to say. I had somebody the other day go, if the Wolf grew up in a town where there's this amazing college, why didn't he go there? And I looked at him and just went, would you want to stay in your hometown while you were in college? I wouldn't. I want to get away from there. Go somewhere else. And plus, when you go to the Harvard of the Midwest, I mean, come on, it's almost like, where else would you want to go? Please. Come on. If you have a chance to go, oh, I say, still in Carmel by the highway. Hey, Dan, I lived in, well, my dad grew up almost to Michigan Road at the time. Carmel was like 106th and really close to Michigan Road, which is now the Villages of West Clay or something out there called something else. But it was way, way out there. And then where I lived was, if you take Keystone north to 126th, hang a left, which is head west, the very first street on the right, across from what used to be called Mohawk Trails apartment complex. I don't even know what's there anymore. You take a right on Ash Drive, back in that little subdivision. It's one of the oldest subdivisions in Carmel. It's probably a slum for Carmel now. But yeah, almost to Keystone on 126th. And that's where we lived. So not too far from we just walk over to the high school. And Carmel Elementary and all that. Sure. That's where I grew up. Back in that little subdivision. Oh, yeah. Can you dig it? Close to the library. You know. Close to the high school. You probably weren't there when the old high school used to be there. I'm talking about the 1900 whatever high school. And the only cool thing about that was that sometimes they would accidentally leave the gymnasium unlocked, or one of the Shepherd brothers, the two guys that won Mr. Basketball in the late 60s and early 70s, they would sometimes get there early in the morning and shoot around. And if you came in, you could go in there and shoot around too. But I was always at that high school. So I was always there after hours on the main gym floor getting to shoot buckets. But that old high school, the gym in it looked like Hoosiers, that had the backboards that went super low. And it had at one end of the floor, the doors to the locker rooms were there, and they were padded in case you ran into them, because they were only like 3 feet from the end line. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going to keep the phone lines open for 2 more minutes. I don't know why I didn't take this banner down. I don't think we're going to get any more donations. So, oops, wrong one. There we go. That was from yesterday's show, which was going to be about gripey stuff, but it turned out the guy called up and made me all happy with his compliments about the Lenny Bruce show. So actually, I'm taking that off there. I'm just closing the phone lines. I'm just deluding myself that anybody's going to call. People used to call, and I'm not talking about the same people. I'm not talking about the Wolf. I'm not talking about Doc Torn. Those people, they'll call anytime. They're good people. But we used to have a variety of people. TWU. I don't know what, Texas Women's University? That's not a bad school at all. It's a damn good school. I feel like if I had grown up in Dallas, I would have either have gone there, or I would have gone to, I think I most likely, though, would have gone to North Texas. North Texas seems to me to be the Ball State of the local area. It really does. Pepe Sylvia says, that's what's up. Yeah, my best friend's daughter went there. That's a good school. That's a darn good school. See, Wolfie and I grew up together. We played football since first grade. So, yes, you have. I put some pictures of the Wolf up from the young era. Let me see if I've still got any of those hanging around here. Of course, I'll have to get rid of some first. I'm only allowed 10. Even though I'm paying for the highest level of StreamYard. Well, I don't know if it's the highest level that I'm paying for, but higher. I think the next level is Enterprise, which is way more than I need in terms of other features. Let's see, show images. Oh, let's see if I can just get here. DGS Wolf. We've documented a great deal of the Wolf here on the Tom Gulley Show, I have to say. We really have. Okay. All right, mister. Okay, tough guy. I think I can do my display here. Icons. Bam. All righty. Let me see here. Well, this isn't super young, and I don't have any of the. Oh, here we go. Maybe this is one. Maybe this will make you happy, Dan. Maybe this will make the Wolf happy. Come on, man. Oh, here we go. It's still processing. Yeah, go ahead and take a week and process. There we go, Dan. There we go, Buckaroo. There you go. There's Kim Warfield. That looks like a young Kim Warfield, right? Maybe you're in the photo somewhere. Maybe you're there somewhere. I have no idea. We can show some of the other ones another time, but that's one of them. That's one of them. Let's see here. Wolfie and I grew up. I know exactly where you lived. Yes. Did I grow up in Carmel? Well, when I was a youngin', we lived out on Michigan Road in Zionsville. And then we moved to Midland, Michigan for like 3 years, 4 years. And I went to kindergarten, first grade there. And then we moved back to Zionsville, like literally 2 or 3 miles down the road from where we lived before on Michigan Road in Zionsville. And I went to Union Township in Zionsville for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And then 6th grade on, I was in Carmel. But it's kind of a misnomer because my dad's family went to Carmel. My dad went to Carmel when it was a tiny farm school. And so we were always in Carmel, doing stuff in Carmel. And when we moved to Carmel when I was in 6th grade, everybody there knew who my dad was and my family was. Because our family, my dad he was from a family of 12 kids. They were all over the place for so many generations and stuff there that all my teachers, everybody. It says Wolfie and I played football at the old Carmel High School football stadium. Yeah, you played for the Kittens. You probably played against the Carmel Pups. The Carmel Pups, who were really good. That old football stadium, I don't even recall us going out there for gym. You stayed off of that. Now I think they play soccer on that field, which is just awesome. But now they have the Carmel University Stadium, which isn't even on the campus. And I've driven by it. I've never actually been in there. So, yeah, the old football stadium at the bottom of the hill there. It's a kind of a cool old stadium. I'm glad they're playing soccer on it now. So anyway, enough of all of that stuff. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation on the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Nice topic, big topic, a lot of good photos. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Please pass it along to somebody else. If you like comedy, we're going to tell you all about Richard Pryor. Wow, did he live an eventful life? We're going to get into it very much in great detail tomorrow evening. And then Wednesday night, I don't know what's going on because I'm supposed to have kind of a person that's a very well-known entertainer in the Tom Gulley sort of. Let's put it this way. If you are a very careful viewer, you may have heard Ed Robertson and I talking about this person and him alluding to the fact that there is a chance that they would be on this program. So I've made all the necessary things, and I just haven't heard back yet. These people are busy, and they've got schedules of their own. So if it doesn't happen tomorrow, maybe it'll happen at another time. And it may not happen at all, and that's fine, too. I don't take that kind of stuff personally. So if I was still doing my podcast, which was way more popular than this show, then I would take it personally. But I don't really... Funky Bronco enjoyed this show. Well, I thank you, Funky Bronco. I'll sleep much easier knowing that. Dupa says, if it's who I think it is, I'm going to lose my mind. No, it's not who you think it is. If you're thinking it's Robert Klein, it's not. I haven't even reached out to him yet. I want to get some more comedians on my thing, so it's not Robert Klein. Because if it was Robert Klein, I'd lose my mind. But it's not. It was one of the Ed Robertson episodes when I mentioned a certain entertainer that's still around and that I'm a tremendous, tremendous fan of. And I know that this entertainer has been extremely busy lately. Peppy says, 5-star shows ahead. Dan Cockra says, laughing out loud, Wolf was an awesome running back. I made all the key blocks. You're the one that sprung him loose because he was a speed merchant, quick-footed, athletic. At any rate, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you being here so much. You guys are really what make this show go, and I couldn't do it if you weren't here, and I wouldn't do it if you weren't here, and you're all just way better to me than I actually deserve. So I appreciate your putting up with my hijinks and whatnot. If you've got any ideas for shows you want, as always, don't hesitate to tell me. Those of you who've been watching for a while know that if you double dog dare me, I'll do a show on anything. I just did a show recently on lint. Lint, I tells you. Is that not reason? I don't know why. Every time I open Skype, it reduces my sound by 7%. But it does. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope if you don't have the chance to be here with us live, that you will watch us on demand, because these are all available if you go to the live section. And I also hope that if you have some spare time, or you're on a large car ride that lasts a long period of time, or you have problems sleeping, this show is the world's only known cure for insomnia. Go back through the old shows, and if there might be a topic there that you, oh wow, if some of the other ones aren't your cup of tea. So anyway, Dupa says, until tomorrow night. Good night, everyone. Dupa dupa doo. I think you are actually, it's you or Julian Zeezer were the very first person to get a membership to this show. And I totally love and appreciate your support. Thank you. And I appreciate the fact that I no longer call you by the name you used to have. How about that? I have been able to not do that. Dupa also says, Dan, that's awesome. You and Wolf grew up together. Happy trails, Dupa. Yes. Dan says, Carmel football team was always good. We never beat them in Pee Wee, but we came close in the early 70s. I believe Mark Herman was quarterback. Well, Mark Herman, who would one day later shatter the NCAA record for total passing yards while at Purdue University, I was his paper boy. And he lived over in the old Harrogate neighborhood, which is just immediately to the east of the high school. He lived over on Bexhill, which is those steep hills that go down. I don't know if you've ever been back in that neighborhood, but yeah, Mark Herman in the early 70s would have been the quarterback there. Mark Herman also, strangely enough, was on the 1977 high school basketball state championships, along with Charlie Scott and Bart. He was a big receiver for him at Purdue. He went to Purdue with Mark Herman. Mark Herman, Purdue, Bart, Carmel. Let's see if I get anything out of that search. Bart Burrow. Yes, the Carmel connection for the Purdue Boilermakers. Been selected for the Hall of Fame induction. Indiana Football Coaches Hall of Fame. Let's see. Mark Herman and Bart Burrow, the famed Carmel connection, have been selected for induction into the Indiana Football Coaches Association Hall of Fame. This was back in 2010. Herman started 45 of 47 games at quarterback for the Boilermakers from 1977 to 1980 and completely rewrote the Purdue and Big Ten record for passing, setting 9 NCAA records along the way. Herman's career passing numbers, all Purdue and Big Ten records, included 1,309 attempts, 772, 9,946 yards, and 71 touchdowns. Wow. Wow. Wowie kazowie. Senior, Herman was named the Big Ten Most Valuable Player, unanimous All-American, 4th in the Heisman Trophy balloting, MVP of 3 straight bowl games, the 1978 Peach, the 1979 Blue Bonnet, and the 1980 1980 Liberty Bowl. Herman and Burl were prep teammates at Carmel High School in Indiana and continued their connection in college, so it was fitting that Herman became the NCAA career passing yards leader with a 14-yard completion to Burl in a 36-25 win over Michigan State at Ross-Ade Stadium in October of 1980. Now, those particular Purdue Boilermakers just outscored people. There was no D there. They just outscored people. Burrell's career numbers included 140 receptions for 2,126 yards and 14 touchdowns. He finished his career ranked second in school history in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns and third in receptions. And there you go. So that was in 2010. But they both played at Carmel High School. And on that Pee Wee team, there you go. Carmel High School now has an indoor practice field. Dan, even when I went there, our weight room was where guys from Purdue in Indiana that lived in Indianapolis would come to Carmel to do their summer workouts in our weight room rather than go down to their university. Our weight room was incredible even back then. So, yeah. I played soccer. Looking at that old clock on the wall, and it says, well, like the Reverend Al Green, it's time for me to get on up out of here. You do not have to go home, but you cannot stay here. So I guess the only thing left to say is, till next time, we'll see you next time.
We're talking about spiders, and we're talking about pervitin, and we're talking about Bigfoot. I'm here to tell you where he's been. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way. They call me Mr. Gulley. I'm here to save the day. They call me Mr. Gulley, and I'm gonna lead the way. Here we go now. I'm talking about Mr. Gulley, and you don't know where he's been. Oh no, he's been right in your alley. Well, I'm Mr. Gulley, yes I am. So what we're talking about?